An armored personnel carrier, or APC, is a broad type of armored military vehicle designed to transport an infantry squad and its equipment in combat zones. They are typically designed to protect against small arms and artillery fire and are lightly armed. During World War II, mainly half-tracks were used in the APC role. Germany had the Sonderkraftfahrzeug, so Special Purpose Vehicle 251, the US Army had the M3, and the British Commonwealth Forces relied on the full-tracked Universal Carrier. However, the Soviet military theorists developed a different approach, which was called the tank descent. It was a military tactic where infantry soldiers ride into an attack on tanks, then dismount to fight on foot in the final phase of the assault. Tank descent troops were infantry soldiers trained in the tactic in order to offer small arms support in suppression of enemy anti-tank weapons or enemy infantry. There is evidence that tank descent was used as early as 1937 during the Spanish Civil War. Infantry units, sappers, and machine gunners were used in the descent role. They were mainly used to solve the following tactical tasks: reconnaissance of the enemy's location, disorganization of the rear and flanks of the enemy, and capturing road junctions in order to cut off the path of the retreating enemy forces. It is important to note that the German and Allied infantry also used armored fighting vehicles as a form of ad hoc transportation from point A to point B. Tank riding was only used when troops needed to move faster than is possible on foot and there was a shortage of motor transport or armored personnel carriers. However, it is important to note that they didn't ride on tanks during an attack. It was a very dangerous endeavor. Tank riders are very vulnerable to machine gun and high explosive fire, and the high silhouette of most tanks would draw enemy fire. Depending on the specific situation, the composition of the tank assault included from a platoon to a company of riflemen acting together with a tank company or tank battalion. About 8 to 10 soldiers were placed on the body of one armored fighting vehicle. The number of infantry assigned to a tank depended on the class of the tank. Generally, a light tank carried 4 to 5, a medium tank carried 5 to 8, and a heavy tank carried 9 to 12 soldiers. Smoke and covering fire may be used to reduce the hazards, but today it is very difficult to estimate how many Soviet soldiers died because of this tactic. After the war, universal mechanization has in theory rendered this tactic mostly obsolete among the more advanced armored forces, with infantry riding special-purpose armored personnel carriers or infantry fighting vehicles into battle. But it is interesting to note that the Soviet T-55 and T-62 tanks were still built with handholds for the tank descent purpose. The use of explosive reactive armor, which creates a danger zone around an armored vehicle by detonating an explosive charge when the tank suffers a serious hit, makes the tank descent concept an even more dangerous and undesirable alternative. Other military forces, including the United States Army in Vietnam War, the Soviet Army in the Soviet-Afghan War, and the Russian ground forces in the First Chechen War, have chosen to ride atop their BTR-80 armored personnel carriers and BMP-1s while on patrol or routine movement, rather than inside of them. In contrast to the offensive Soviet tank descent tactics of World War II, these soldiers wanted to be able to move from their vehicles quickly in a case of ambush, which often turned their transports into death traps. Fearing rocket-propelled grenades, widely used by the guerrillas, these soldiers refused to stay inside the personnel carriers for several reasons. For example, the infantrymen on the outside represented more eyes and rifles at the ready to locate and fire upon a small force or single ambusher. Explosive concussions inside the personnel compartment caused by a rocket-propelled grenade hitting the armor was said to be much more dangerous than enemy fire on the personnel mounted outside. Many of these soldiers wore body armor, which reduced their fear of small arms fire. And finally, wounded soldiers trapped inside were very unlikely to be extracted safely until after the battle, especially if the vehicle was on fire. During the Second Chechen War and other local conflicts of post-Soviet era, the units of the Russian military and law enforcement acquired the tactic, making it a routine. However, riding outside the vehicle is still prohibited by Russian military doctrine, so it is not used during training and maneuvers.